companies is foreseeable and predictable, stressing the importance of strong underwriting and risk management.
The entirety of the companies that you see that are public today, everyone was $40 billion in 2008.
Yeah.
We're now close to $1 trillion, Blackstone more, KKR a little less. This is not good management, or not solely good management. This is a function of structural change in our marketplace. And that structural change is continuing, and the reward for good work is actually more work. In our case, it's managing more money. And I think that is where we're heading. I think this will be a shakeout. I don't think it is going to be short term.
And Soros Fund Management says investors in both private credit and private equity face a painful 18 to 24 months. CIO Don Fitzpatrick told us that the AI risk and conflict in the Middle East will weigh on markets.
The realization that investors are coming to now is this is not going to be a couple-day event. This is going to be really, really hard. And I just think market participants are dealing with an enormous amount of uncertainty.
More ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
Markets okay with second half of the year rate cuts.
Don't miss Bloomberg Brief, live every weekday.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets?
We are seeing modest gains across European equity markets.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
Now, with the geopolitical events that we talked about, I just need to see. We need to get a lot more data in. Right now, it's just too soon to know what imprint this has on inflation and for how long.
Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari at the Bloomberg Invest event in New York. And of course, energy prices are front and center, and the impact potentially on inflation, that is a concern. We are seeing yields, though, trend lower in cash trading as our stock futures pointing declines on a day where the dollar is more or less moving sideways on the Bloomberg Dollar Index. And against this backdrop, the biggest contest so far of the U.S. 2026 midterm election cycle is underway, with voters in Texas making their choices in a statewide primary. The vote could determine whether Democrats have a shot at narrowing the gap with Republicans in the Senate come November. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Texas bureau chief, Julie Fine. So, Julie, polls set to close soon. What do we know so far?
Polls are set to close in most parts of the state in 20 minutes. However, in Texas, one city, El Paso, is in a different time zone. So it's another hour and 20 minutes until the polls close there. So we really won't know until after that, even any type of trends in this race. We will see the early vote counts, but it could take some time before all the votes are counted in Texas this evening. It could go early in the morning because these are expected to be close primaries.
There's a new rule about polling locations that seems to be causing some consternation.
Yes, there is some problems in Dallas. There is a new rule here in Dallas County. What happened is both parties generally used to run the elections together. The Republicans decided this time around they wanted their own primary. Because they separated the primaries, on voting day, people in Dallas County must go to their home location. And the last several elections, they could vote anywhere they want in Dallas County. So there was a lot of confusion today. Some people didn't know about the vote change. There was an injunction that was filed just a short time ago. Polls will now be open 2 hours longer this evening, which could delay votes even further.
We've got Republicans weighing how much they support President Trump's agenda, Democrats weighing how they can put up the opposition, right? How do we see the domestic issues at play here and the international issues with, of course, the war in the Middle East looming large?
Well, the war in the Middle East began after early voting ended here in Texas. Many people vote here in early voting. There are 11 days of it, so we don't yet know. We should find out possibly from some exit polling if that affected how people vote in the primary.
Julie, what do we know about the runoff likelihood, very quickly if you can?
Very quickly, it is extremely likely that the Republicans will have a runoff in this election. It is expected that it could be between Ken Paxton and the incumbent Senator John Cornyn. That is extremely likely.
Bloomberg Texas Bureau Chief Julie Fine there. Well, the Texas primaries will test President Trump's clout with Republican voters as his administration prepares for the midterms while managing its latest military incursion in the Middle East.
I thought we were going to have a situation where we were going to be attacked. They were getting ready to attack Israel. They were getting ready to attack others. You're seeing that right now. And a lot of those missiles that are hitting in, those are stationary. Those were aimed there for a long period of time at these other countries. So I think I was right about that. We attacked first. And if we didn't, it could have been, you know, look, we're really decimating them. They're being decimated. And if we didn't, and by the way, we have massive amounts of ammunition.
Joining us now is Michael Shoebridge, who's a founder and director of Strategic Analysis Australia. He previously served as Australia's senior defence policy official in the Australian Embassy in Washington. Michael, great to have you with us. And of course, the latest assurances that we've heard from President Trump for oil markets, at least, seem to have more or less the intended effect. Of course, not a great deal of detail in terms of how this would actually be executed. But what do you make of, I guess, the strategic and operational planning at play here for this next phase of the conflict? Because he's not ruling out having ground troops at all. He's not ruling out wanting complete regime change. At the same time, recognizing that a change in leadership could be more of the same, or even those taking on a harder line.
Well, Heidi, the political goals remain unclear. You're right, all the way from leaving the regime in place but having more pragmatic people to deal with to a complete change of government inside Iran. But the military goals, at least narrowly, look much clearer. So destroying Iran's missile stocks, ability to fire missiles at Israel, American forces in the Gulf states, destroying its navy, and destroying a lot of its government and military facilities. And that intense targeting of Iranian missiles, military and government sites can go on for some weeks yet.
President Trump also reiterated his justification for launching the attack on Iran, which supplies many, including allies of the US, right, saying that a nuclear war was imminent. The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog has said that there's no evidence to suggest that is true. What do you make of that, as, you know, particularly from the perspective of allies looking to, you know, give their support or perhaps remain on the sidelines?
Well, I think allied capitals are all on the back foot and quite confused. Unlike, say, the second Iraq War, the big Gulf War, there was a lot of consultation of with allies and partners and internationally before that conflict. This, allies are much more blindsided and trying to play catch-up. But nuclear claims look a bit overstated because Iran's program had been set back. There's no credible evidence they were close to a weapon. The administration, US administration, is still giving different justifications. But we're right in the early days of what could be a war that might last for some time.
Michael, aside from what we know or don't know about Iran's nuclear assets, what about its weaponry and its use of drones amid this fight? How do you think this is going to be playing out in the near term?
Well, in the near term, I think we've seen a pattern emerge already where the Iranian government is clearly fractured, but it's still able to launch missiles and drones in combination at targets from Cyprus to Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states. And it looks like it can keep doing that. And the weapon that's most effective is the Shahed drone. these slower moving small aircraft that's hit things like the US Embassy in Saudi Arabia and oil storage in Oman.
And what do we know about the math when it comes to its weaponry for Iran? I mean, I know it's a bit of an impossible question, but that does inform the extent in which we can see this dragging on for at a time where these cheaper Iranian drones are being used against much more expensive Patriot weapons from the US.
Well, exactly. I think that's an excellent point. The economics favour drones over the expensive defensive systems. So the high-end US counter missile systems like Patriot and THAAD cost millions of dollars per missile, and you've got to fire a couple of those to hit an incoming missile. The Iranian drones cost about $30,000 each. They can make hundreds a day, and they can be launched from small vehicles and ramps. So the economics favour drones over traditional systems. And then the critical thing is how quickly will the Gulf states and the Americans start to run short of their interceptor systems?
You've said probably a few weeks, but ultimately the US and its allies would want a relatively quick way to wrap this up. If it doesn't, if it is extended, how much concern is there for security pacts and allies in the Asia-Pacific if the distraction becomes more of an ongoing one? Does that call into question levels of defence spending and budgeting for countries like Australia?
Absolutely. I think that the problem is that high-end, intense campaigns like we're seeing now from Israel and the US can't last for long. And if the Iranians just bunker down and wait it out, they can stay in control and still cause a major threat to the countries around them. That's the worst case. But really, like Hamas, they only have to climb out of the rubble at the end and say, we're here, for it to look like a victory. And every other country is watching this conflict after the war in Ukraine, and we're realising the lessons about drone warfare and missile warfare need to be learned much faster.
Michael, do you think this is a forever war?
Well, I think it's very hard to see it tied up with a bow and over inside a few weeks, unless the Iranian government collapses. And then the forever part of it is what happens next in Iran, because it's quite clear that the US government doesn't want a major ground presence like we've seen in Afghanistan and Iraq, but there are still long-term consequences, even if it looks like the initial part of the war goes well. So it could be a short, intense war, but with a very long tail.
Michael, what's been interesting to me is also perhaps the lack of mention of the use of Chinese weaponry amid this conflict versus global conflicts that we've been seeing in the past year. Do you get a sense that, China might be supplying any sort of weaponry to Iranians, or at least when it comes to dual use and drones?
The Iranians are a centre of drone expertise themselves. So the Russians are producing a copy of an Iranian drone, the Shahed drone we've been talking about, and they've been using that in large numbers against Ukraine. Ironically, the Americans have reverse engineered an Iranian drone, the Shahed, and called it the Lucas, and they're using it against Iran, but in small numbers. So I don't think drone technology is a big need the Iranians have from China. There were rumours that the Chinese were going to sell a really advanced anti-ship missile to the Iranians, but it looks like that was all left too late. China's weapons have not played a big role in the Iranian arsenal so far.
Michael, really great to have you with us. Michael Shoebridge, founder and director of Strategic Analysis Australia. More ahead on the Asia Trade. This is Bloomberg.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm David Gura.
I'm Lisa Mateo.
And I'm Christina Ruffini. We're tracking breaking news today from Wall Street to Washington.
Let's start overseas.
The sector is really propelling this deal forward.
Yeah, the hope is this will open up new markets and provide some additional liquidity.
Of course, now they're going to have competitors. We got a big week coming up in politics.
Earnings season is underway. We're going to get some key reports.
Everything you need to know before the markets open on Monday.
Introducing Bloomberg This Weekend, bringing a little Bloomberg into your weekend routine.
Guys, buckle up.
The trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg.
It's another day of selling in the early goings for Asia stocks. Nikkei extending those declines from a day ago, 2% down. And for the moment, it looks like some of that selling is quite broad-based. You're seeing it reflected in the topics as well. On the South Korean gauge, a bit hard to decipher the movers. It was interesting. Maybe we saw a bit of reprieve for the chip-making losses, but it looks like another extension of the Tuesday selling at a time where the currency is also facing immense pressure. This is not a great setup for the open of Greater China markets. We'll track the opens next. This is Bloomberg.